North Carolina has always had a rich musical heritage, and we're proud to be a part of such a great treasure.
Join Brooke and I as we talk to some of our favorite musicians, some good friends from our home state of North Carolina. Hear their story and see how bluegrass music has shaped their lives and their career. Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Carolina Sessions with Brooke and I. Today's special guest we have Mr. Wayne Benson. How you doing, Wayne?
I'm doing great, buddy. Drinking coffee and playing the mandolin some today already.
Hard to beat that morning, ain't it?
It is.
Now, buddy, you're from Concord, North Carolina, and man, I've been following you since I was a young teenager, and it's our honor to have you on this morning. Can you
I appreciate
growing
that.
up in Concord?
Yeah, that area, rich in bluegrass, the central part of the state there. I graduated in 1987, so I was in that area kind of in the transition time of the textile industry kind of going away at that particular, from 85 to 1990. A lot of things changed with the way the economy and everything worked in the Carolinas. My dad was in the construction business, which was great for me because I worked for him, and it was easy I was working for somebody that would let me kind of come and go as I needed to get a, bluegrass career off the ground.
Yeah. And your dad played as well, right?
That's right. He played at the end of his life. He was really into banjo playing, and early on played some fiddle and guitar. He was a big Jimmy Martin fan. I remember a lot of those records around in Flat and Scruggs, and he and some of his brothers and my uncles on my mom's side of the family all played music. That was my introduction to playing with other people around the holidays. Typically when people had more time off of work, we would get together and play music or just to visit his family, but music was always a part of it. And a lot of my other relatives worked in the textile industry that I was talking about, but music was every day there were records put on the turntable at my house, Osborne Brothers records, just anything in bluegrass.
That's awesome, man. I got to meet your dad several times at shows and stuff. I remember seeing him a lot at the rock school, and
Yep.
in Asheville he came and got to talk to him, and man, he was always a hollering and cheering for you. I loved watching him, getting to talk to him.
Yeah, he was he loved music. Because I grew up, we didn't travel a lot or go on vacations or that kind of thing, but I remember my parents taking me to see Bill Monroe when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. And that was the first professional, band that I had ever watched. It was a schoolhouse somewhere, I think near Monroe, North Carolina, that we went to.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember other festivals and places that you went to as a kid or, grew up where there was a lot of picking and?
Oh, yeah. Well,
on?
mainly after I was driving, then, it was like you really do find your freedom and all the different places. The Mineral Springs Music Barn, I remember seeing the Bluegrass Cardinals play there. Larry Sparks would go through and play that gig, and the Lost and Found. It was one of those kind of venues that those bands would play, and then on the other side of things, this is when I first started to realize that there were different levels of bands as far as how much money a band would earn or just the surroundings that you would find around their music, like going to see Newgrass Revival at Green Acres. Yeah. A completely different experience than Mineral Springs, or like over in Charlotte, I used to see the Tony Rice unit at Spirit Square, which was a really nice venue. There was a place in Lenoir called the Sally Gooden. I used to go see Newgrass Revival there. It seems like Doyle Lawson, I remember their band going through there. But yes, any chance that I had to go watch professional music, I did in that area.
Yeah.
Who was some of your early picking buddies, I guess, when you was in high school after you started digging in playing?
Well, the first one that would have to come to mind would be Clay Jones. That I met him as a probably 16-year-old at fiddlers conventions, and we were really like family. We were like brothers. He would come down to the house, and my mom would keep him fed. He'd stay for like maybe 3 or 4 days. And at this time, I was maybe even still in high school. And then when I would get home from school, we'd pick, until bedtime. He was Clay's maybe a year or two older than I am, but definitely Clay. And then our buddy Greg Luck that you've picked with a lot. He and I were roommates when we moved to Nashville. So, making the journey out of the Carolinas over to Nashville for the years that I lived there, Greg was a big part of that. And then a lot of them are, the same guys that you've picked with too, with Lester Deaton, a great friend of mine and amazing player and singer, really good finder of material. Lester is, and a good writer too. And then Eric Ellis on banjo. There's so many pickers from that area that we rub shoulders with.
I've heard you talk about the Fiddlers Convention days, and y'all just picking a bunch of those in different configurations. And even sometimes you say you and Clay and just go at it, the two of you.
You would, yeah. Yeah, a lot of times those days would, I was working at a garage at the time, and Saturdays we were only open a half day. So around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd start making phone calls to see who was planning on going to the Mooresville Fiddlers Convention or whatever, and try to have a band in place, or at least know that we had all the instruments covered. And if not, maybe pick somebody up and borrow them out of another band to be able to play.
Right.
Yeah. Some of the best times of my life were playing those contests. And the cool thing, too much of a competitive nature is not good for your musicianship, but for a young player, it gives you a body of material to work on. If you're in a regional band and you've got a set list that you've worked out, or even if it's just 3 songs that you intend to play at a fiddlers convention, it gives you something to work on with a different kind of intention than when you're just trying to learn a break, off of a bluegrass album band record. It's a different kind of rehearsal. So I feel like that did a lot for me as a formative thing to become a bluegrass player.
Right. Absolutely. About how old was you when you moved out to Nashville?
Let's see. I guess I would have been 23 at the time. I had just started playing with Third Time Out in January of that year, and then probably April or May, just a few months later, Greg and I moved to Nashville. Yep. So I'm going to say 23. That sounds right.
So you were still in North Carolina when you hooked up with Scott with Livewire, I guess.
Yes, I sure was. Yeah, I was still living with my parents. I was 19 when we put that band together.
And did you just hearing you talk in the past, I think you and Scott hooked up maybe at Spigma or something. Is that right? To start talking.
We did. We sure did. I was playing the contest with Clay and Lester Deaton and Eric Ellis. The 4 of us were just playing Spigma, and Scott was out there just kind of hanging out, and he had already left Quicksilver, and the 2 of us had picked, played in jam sessions and stuff at Denton and at previous years at Spigma when we would run into each other, and he started talking about wanting to put a group together, and I was all in, ready for it.
Yeah. Man, that was a great record y'all put together. And again, you can tell us who all was in the band there with you with Livewire.
That also included Ernie Sykes on bass and Robert Hale on guitar. It's weird to look back on that because, like I say, I was 19.
Yeah. And
Ernie was 30 at the time. And I remember thinking, this is he's kind of an old dude to have in the band, but he can still cut it. And your perspective on that is so different at that age.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, he was a great singer, a good tenor singer, good bass player.
And fun guy to travel with, too. One of the wittiest guys I've ever known.
And Robert Hale, that was some great songs on that record. And a lot of people started learning that material when y'all put that out, man. It had a great impact on younger musicians. such as myself.
Man, it's hard for me to imagine that it did, because I was so, I mean, it's in the process of learning myself. I cringe when I hear that record. The one thing that I like about it is that it totally has its own identity.
Yeah.
Band as a whole, the sound of it was, everybody was just kind of doing their own thing and being their self. And it wasn't like it was so, trying to emulate your heroes is an important thing, but a lot of times bands end up kind of coming up short when it comes to their own identity. And that band, I felt like, kind of dodged that bullet. We had our own sound.
Sure did, man. Home Again became a good standard, man. A lot of the younger folks and stuff, they're in a good jam session playing a lot of album band and dull stuff, and then you throw a Livewire tune on them. You step up a notch,
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that song. That's probably my favorite cut.
It is. That's a great song, man.
On that record, I've not heard that disc in a long time. I did get a text message a few days ago with a student trying to find it. I'm pretty sure it's out of print.
Yeah, I got a tape of it, I know, and then of course a burnt CD or something. But I've got the original cassette of it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, good style. And what mandolin did you play on that record?
That was a Bob Shoe mandolin. That was he was a builder.
Yeah.
Again, another North.
Right. The Shoe family's from Concord, right?
That's right. When their band would rehearse, Bob was also a banjo player. I could hear their rehearsal from my house.
How about that?
That's how close it was, like a block down the road to where Bob lived, and he did all of my fret work and setup stuff and everything as a younger player.
Yeah.
I could just walk down there or even ride my bike and take a mandolin to him or whatever. Weird to think about all that.
Well, what linked you up with Third Time Out guys, man? I know that come next probably in your career.
It did. Actually, I mean, just bluegrass is a fairly small community, and you hear, when a rumor comes up or whatever, and I wanted to pick. And the Livewire thing just wasn't panning out. I feel like that band to some extent was a little bit ahead of its time with what we did, because the record didn't really represent what the band sounded like live, especially after we started to plug in and different things that we did that were very much taboo at that time in bluegrass. So when I heard, at this time, Lou Reed was playing mandolin with Third Time Out, and I heard that he and Terry were leaving to put a group together. So I called Ray Deaton at the time. I had his phone number. So I just called him and told him that I would be interested in trying out for the band.
Wow.
And then once they heard you, they knew that was a must.
Well, I don't know about that, but it was the vocal stuff, because he's basically said on the phone, he said, man, if you can sing these parts, I know you'll be the guy that we want, but we got to have somebody to sing in these quartets. And I actually tried out for that band in the parking lot at the mall in Greensboro, North Carolina. Yeah. They were on their way to Ohio or something. I can't remember what the travel that they had for the last gigs that they were doing with Lou and Terry, but I tried out, met them in a parking lot and played.
Right on, man.
Well, I remember when I was in college, Darin took me to several different gigs to see John Cowan, and you just happened to be a part of that lineup at the time. I guess that's the first time I probably met Wayne.
Probably
was at those shows, but
Blowing Rock, man,
yeah,
at the
Canyons.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that venue well. There was a really great or really cool hotel, a really historic hotel that we stayed in when we played there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Cowan talks about having that van that you traveled in, the turtle shell van, the top of it. He said the first time y'all stayed there, if you was with him, pulled up underneath that thing, and he said it took the whole top off of it.
It took the entire air conditioning unit off of the top of the vehicle. I can't remember who was driving for John at the time, but it did. It took the whole top off. I mean, you could just see out, and of course, it's drizzling rain.
Oh, no.
When that happened, and we pulled around. There was a dumpster at the back of that hotel, and it was a young fella that was driving for John at the time. He got on top of the vehicle, and pieces that were still kind of left hanging on or whatever, he just took them off and threw them into the dumpster. And Jeff Autry went to like a local Home Depot or Lowe's or something and bought some really thick plastic that he found and several rolls of duct tape. And we put, right around the edge of that hole, we taped it on there, and then put a bigger piece and taped it, and then a bigger piece. And then we drove it for like the next 4 days of gigs like that.
Wow. That's bluegrass right there, ain't it?
It is. Yeah, you got to survive. That's right.
Those are the kind of stories that make you look back and are glad you have those memories. I mean, at the time, it probably wasn't a great memory, but
Oh, yeah, they're always like that. That's you reliving that kind of thing is always fun.
Yeah.
Once you get it behind you.
Absolutely. I've got several stories like that from Charlie's bus.
I'm sure.
A few of them we was teamed up a lot together because Ray was booking us, and we had to ride with y'all on a couple gigs when the bus would break down. Right. It was good. But back to Third Time Out, you mentioned the vocal arrangements and stuff. Man, you sure fit in. And I know y'all earned, 7 years IBMA Vocal Group of the Year?
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
Vocal arrangements, man. And yours and Steve's and Russell's, man, was, of course, Ray singing bass. And I know Ray jumped to tenor a lot of stuff, too. And it was just a great...
Right, on just about all of the trio stuff.
Yeah.
From that era, he did sing tenor as well. But during those years, I mean, I had never been a harmony singer at all. And we would have vocal rehearsal, and I would go for like 3 days, and my mandolin would never see daylight. All we did was sing. I mean, that was how we got tight. And a lot of that would have been on me in those quartets. I needed to work on it, but it helped all of us. And we rehearsed through a sound system, and this was, way before the days of ear monitors. So we were all looking for that blend, like to really hear what was going on in the house, because a lot of this was before Donnie ever started mixing the band. So you're relying on your ear to hear that mix. And it really was the art of working a PA system was focused on just as much as the vocal parts that we were all singing and the dynamics of the music. It was also making the best out of the situation that you had to work with in terms of the sound system. A lot of thought went into it.
Did y'all practice, I guess, at Everett's there a lot?
We did. We sure did.
Yeah, that was a good thing to have for rehearsals right there, was that?
Oh, yeah, it was really comfortable because the place would be empty. You had all the space in the world. It was a real help, and we recorded all of it, too. They had a tape deck hooked up to the soundboard, so every rehearsal was recorded and then listened to, later that night.
Yeah. Now, you was on, before you left to go with Cowan, how many projects? Probably 4, I guess, maybe?
With Third Time Out?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I'd have to count it up. I think it's a lot more than 4, because I was in the band for 12 years, and then I left to go with John. Yeah. So I'm going to say it would be closer to probably 8.
8 before you left?
Projects, yeah, I would think so, because we recorded, way more. In those days, bluegrass was in such a peak time around Old Brother, Where Art Thou and all that. There was a lot of music recorded. I know that we did the first record with Rebel, Grandpa's Mandolin was that, and then we were with Rounder for, I think,
Letter to Home, which was one of my favorite records there.
Yes, and then there was a record between that with a the New Haven label that we recorded a gospel record with them. And then I think there were 4 albums with Rounder total, counting the live one, because there was John and Mary was with Rounder also. And then Russell and started Chateau, his own label, and I played on a gospel project, Singing on Streets of Gold, and then also Best Darn Ride. So there was a pile of records made in those 12 years. Yeah.
And I know you've recorded several since you've been back with the band. How long have you been back with the band now?
I've been back longer than the first stretch was. I'm in my 13th year since I returned.
And time flies on it.
It sure does.
Wow.
Yep.
So you spent what led up to going back to Cowan's band, of kind of splitting apart there and coming a part of John's band?
Well, just at that time, I wanted to be in a group that would lend itself more to improvisation as a musician. And that was certainly a part of John's music, because you guys played with him, but with what we were doing, I mean, any night he might just put a jam section into a tune and then call 2 people out, to play just the 2 of them and the rest of the band stop. And that kind of thing really did appeal to me. And it was, Kristen and I were still living in Nashville at the time. Hogan hadn't been born. And it was just, for me, I guess I was just ready to experiment and to play something different. And Newgrass Revival is definitely, if I had to name one, all-time favorite band that would come under the bluegrass umbrella, it would have to be Newgrass. And I saw that band live so many times here in the Carolinas and played some shows with them in different locations too before they broke up. So an opportunity to play with John there was just no way I could, turn away from that.
Yeah, we felt the same way.
Mm-hmm.
He asked us about playing, but what an honor to sing and to pick with him for sure.
No doubt.
Well, living in Nashville, you did a lot of sessions and stuff too, I guess. I've seen on the records, and of course reading a lot about you as we get prepared for this, and a bunch of it I've known because we've been friends for so long, but you was a good part of the clique over there, getting a good mandolin player to play.
Oh, man, again, back to that whole "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" stretch that we went through. There was a lot of music being recorded, and I was, earlier this year with the pandemic, it was amazing how much help Music Cares was for a lot of people. And when I was actually sending the information in to apply for aid with them, I went to my own Wikipedia page, which I never do. And it might have been the first time seeing it. And the discography, it was like, it was unreal, the reminder of how many records were made, like from 1994 up until 2004. If you took those 10 years, it was really a hot time, as they say, for bluegrass. Think about all the people that we would know that made solo projects during that time, and all the demos that were recorded. Yeah. People were writing songs. There was a lot of work in that time.
And some of those recordings, man, will go down in history. Some of the best instrumentals was the Bluegrass Sessions, like 95 and 96, 97, and that you and Scott, worked on. Man, there was some great recordings there.
Those were fun records to make. They were. And we ended up with kind of like a formula, with people bringing original stuff to the band, and we would get together and rehearse for like one day before we actually went into the studio, and that could be like maybe a week prior to the session. And then if we wanted to tweak arrangements or something, we could, but for a lot of stuff was already arranged. And then some of it we worked up, in the spot, but those were really laid back records, man. We would just play, go eat Mexican food, and come back. Most of the time, all the tracks would be done in like 2 days. Wow. And then another day to maybe fix a few things and then mix it.
Yeah. I know Clay Jones was playing guitar on the first one, and then Jeff Aldridge pretty much played the rest of them.
He did.
Well, Aldridge played fiddle, and Scott, of course, and you.
Right.
He was on a few, and Schatz played bass on some of them.
He did. And Cowan played on one of the later records, maybe the 2001 version of it. Yeah. But the whole series started, the Bluegrass 95 was originally, it was Clay's record. It was a solo project that he did. And after recording it, then he left the music business. He wasn't, I think Caleb was maybe fairly small at the time, his son. But that record, rather than just let it sit on the shelf, David Parmley had produced it, and he recommended to Tom Riggs. He said, "Why not just put it out and call it something else, because it features all this other, instrumental stuff that's on it." And there were tunes that the fiddle kicked off and the mandolin. It wasn't like it was a straight ahead just guitar record, and that's how the whole series was really born.
Right.
It wasn't like it was an idea that anyone had. It was almost an accident that it started.
Well, it was a great one at that, man. It had I learned so many good fiddle tunes and instrumental tunes from listening to that. And at that same time, man, the Mando Monster CD come out, and you was a big part of that as well.
Yeah, that was just 2 songs with a bunch of different pickers on it. I don't even remember how many different players, but each of us had 2 cuts.
Yeah, I knew
on the records.
Spark Plug was the name of one of your songs.
Could have been, yeah.
And
I might have thought of that name on the way to the studio.
I remember learning it at the time. I knew one of them was in D, and I can't think what the other song was. It was on.
The other one was that it was a Jay Unger tune, Around the Horn.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
From I think it's the Catskill Mountain Goose Chase record of his that I actually learned that tune from Jeff Autry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, did Jeff play guitar with you, or was that Luck?
No, that was Luck. Yeah. I recorded that at Kurt Story's, a studio that he had at an apartment that he was living at the time, because I remember he was on crutches. I remember him coming to the door that morning on crutches, and then I cut those 2 songs that morning, to have some, because that was the first time that I'd ever booked a studio or something like that.
Well, you didn't go wrong with having somebody play good rhythm, because Luck sure can.
Yeah, he sure can. He makes it fun.
Tell us about, I think it was, I can't remember the year, man, maybe 2001 or 2, when Gibson put out a signature Wayne Benson model. Did what, 50 of them?
That was the plan, was to make 50. It was. I'm not sure that they got to that number. I think it was somewhere in the high 30s, where it, during that time was when a lot of things changed at Gibson, especially the amount of money that those instruments were sold for at retail. There was a big price increase that happened along that same time. But yeah, that was just an amazing honor, and I owe that to Danny Roberts. He headed that whole thing up. There was also an Adam Steffi and an Alan Bobby model. Those were limited run signature instruments, where the Sam Bush and the Doyle Lawson, as far as I know, you could still get those right now if you wanted one.
Right. And they give a lot of those instruments out at that time. I remember I got a Lawson mandolin when I was with the Country Gentlemen, and a lot of the professional players in the bands, they wanted to have a lot of those models, man. And I was fortunate to get one of those. But I remember yours being a very beautiful and just a good looking mandolin, and you helped design that. Is that right?
Well, the color was, that was an F4 Sunburst that Gibson had, that Danny, I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right, showed it to me. They had one of them at the factory. And there was another master model that he had done a, what do they call it? The finish that's duller like that. Satin.
Yeah.
Satin finish. And so we took those 2 elements and combined them. And I was always a fan of the no inlay in the fretboard, just that streamlined look. And I'm a fern guy, because I own an old fern, so I wanted that overlay. And though it seems like the fern on those really stands out because of the fretboard not having the pearl markers in it. So
Yeah.
I like that. And I loved the abbreviated pick guard instead of going all the way down and having the bracket on the end of it. So cosmetically, I think that it's a neat looking instrument also.
Oh, it's a hot rod, man. It looks great. It was killing.
Mhm.
I still might own one someday.
I think
What
you
do you think?
should, yeah.
That'd be a Christmas present, baby.
There you go.
Oh, me. But you've been nominated and have won the Manlin Player of the Year several times. What, 5 times now at Spigma?
I think that's right. It's been a while since those years, but I believe that is correct.
Yeah. That's great, man. I always, like I say, I saw you when I was 16 years old or 15 at the rock school, and probably, of course, I grew up in a musical family, and my mom, taught clogging, and I'd heard bluegrass music and probably been around it when I was a kid, but didn't pay attention enough. But when I got the bug to really start learning and picking myself, I came to see y'all at the rock school, and you was the nicest to me and encouraged me. And I got a VCH tape of that. I had my mom record it, and just, man, really listened to that and looked up to you so much. You've always been a good friend and a buddy, and, man, I studied you all that I could. And
well, I appreciate that.
Great.
I remember you calling me once when you were with Dr. Bobby, and you guys were in Nashville for, I think, Butch Baldassare.
Yeah.
Put together a mandolin camp or a mandolin weekend.
Right.
And I talked to you while you were in town. That would have been, what, 93 or something, 94?
Maybe 95, I guess.
Okay.
I remember that, looking up. And I don't know that, man, I might have looked you and Luck up in the phone book out there.
Yep. Well, it was definitely pre-cell phone times.
Yeah. I think
sure.
My memory, because I just said, I want to try to call them, see whatever, we get up. Sure enough. And speaking of Butch, man, he was a great instructor and, man, a good teacher in the mandolin, in which you have become a great one yourself. How long have you been teaching now, Wayne?
Mainly the 13 years since we moved back over to Carolina. We live right outside of Spartanburg in Boiling Springs, South Carolina, is where we are. And after coming back here, I was thinking to myself, I'm going to lose the studio work and being there in Nashville. So maybe some teaching would help to supplement the income or whatever. And it was weird because everything in the recording industry kind of changed at that point too. And now people just email a session that they want you to play on. And Kristen and I both do a good number of overdubs just here at the house and then Dropbox it back to people. And then the whole teaching thing just kind of started. There was somebody that had a regional newsletter. I don't remember who it was at the time now, but I put like they put a word out that I was going to start teaching here in this area. And so I did, and I ended up with 4 or 5 students, that were consistent every week or every other week, whatever they were at the time. And then I don't remember what Kristen was doing, but she had an interview with somebody and they wanted to do it on Skype. So she downloaded Skype on our computer. And I remember one night I was, sitting on the couch and she was at the computer, and a fella from Florida had emailed me and wanted to do Skype lessons. And when she was there, I said, hey, while you're at the computer, email him back for me and book a Skype lesson and I'll try one. And that's how the whole Skype thing, got started, that the word of mouth, it just kind of mushroomed from there.
Yeah.
It's weird how things like that sneak up. You don't intend for it to happen, but it's been such a blessing with the times that we have right now, especially for Kristen. She's really teaching a lot these days.
Yeah. Well, it's been good to me over the years. I've probably been teaching about 20 years since I started touring out with the gentleman, and I just thought it was something good to beginner guitar and banjo and mandolin, a little bit of fiddle, and one thing led to another. And all of a
Yep.
sudden you got 50 students, a week. But now I don't have that many. It's too hard to do that and be married, which
Yeah, man, it's tough to handle. It doesn't sound like much, if you say, hey, I'm teaching 20 hours this week. Because if you were, going to a job that was 20 hours of work, that would feel like a part-time thing. But when you're teaching and you're handling all of the scheduling, that's the part about it that feels like a labor to me.
Yeah.
It's like if you've got 6 total hours booked and part of them are 30-minute sessions. So say you've got 9 different people that you have to contact because all of a sudden you're leaving a day earlier that week than you thought you were going to have to. That's the stuff that feels like work. It's like these 9 people need a text message to reschedule all of a sudden. And that's a lot to get done, or it is to me, because that's not the kind of thing that I feel good about doing,
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the YouTube thing is so cool for me, because as a teacher, I don't use tab or tend to write a lot of stuff down, and I can refer someone to a video or send them a link to it and say, check this out to reinforce what we talked about today. So it's messing with that channel the way that I have been is as much of it's going to help me in that way.
Right.
That was one of the initial reasons that I even wanted to go in that direction.
Which you just started that YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, I think it's maybe 5 weeks old at this point.
Yeah.
So it's still young. I just passed 500 subscribers.
Oh, good deal.
At this point.
There and check out Wayne's channel on his mandolin playing and stuff. And you also got a DVD out, right? Instructional DVD.
Yeah, that I'm pretty sure is out of print also. That DVD it was with AccuTab.
Uh-huh.
You might find it, but I haven't had any of them to sell in years.
Now, is some of it on YouTube as well? I know they put.
It could be. It could be. I haven't ever really looked to find out.
Yeah. But just back to the teaching, man, you really dug into theory, and we've got to do a lot of workshops together over the years, and it's always been an honor for that. But I'd say, in the last 20 years, man, they've been 3 or 4 really good teachers to get across, just besides playing Soldier's Joy or something, But I think Marshall was a great teacher, and Butch Baldessari, of course, was an excellent instructor on the mandolin, and you have become one of those guys, I think, man.
Well, I appreciate it. It's for me, I try to look at, and this is my the whole concept of Wayne's World of Mandolin as far as the channel is that you see so many people, and maybe they've been playing for 5 to 7 years, whatever length of time, and in that amount of time they've memorized 50 standards. They can play 9-pound hammer in A. They can play some cabin tunes in G. They probably learned Red-Haired Boy. And in that same amount of time that it took to memorize all of those tunes in that song-specific approach, they could have learned how to play the mandolin. Yeah. And there's a big, because not everybody makes that leap. Not everybody, like when you learn something in G, then all of a sudden that information is useful on the next song that you do in G. Not everybody makes that connection. And that's where understanding some scales and a little bit of theory and knowing something about modes can make you, really take full advantage of the time that you spend playing, because it's so much easier to apply all those other things. It's just like those little light bulbs come on for a lot of people. Because I think everyone's musicianship these days is a combination of your learned musicianship, just studying the fretboard, and then the musical experiences that you have. Yeah. If you meet somebody and they sing in B flat all the time, then you're going to put eggs in that basket, and that gives you a reason to be strong, just the logical things like that. And so then you can kind of figure out what your weaknesses are and concentrate on those areas, to make better use of your time, like practical things to work on. It's
Absolutely.
it never stops. It's interesting to look at someone's playing these days, especially because we have a generation of players that a lot of what they do is conceived to be played by itself. Instead of being a band guy like we are, where you're always feeding on someone else and trying to make it work, and you feel like you're a spoke in the wheel. Even that concept, a lot of people don't really get it. So I try to touch on that kind of thing too, because if you've never been in a band, you couldn't really expect to grow in that direction.
Sure. Yeah, we've discussed a lot of times, man, between the fretboard that much, there's so much there to learn.
Yeah, no doubt. And what I know about it is the grain of sand on the beach. I mean, if you had 15 lifetimes, you never scratch the surface.
Yeah. And in teaching other people and digging in, you learn so much yourself on it, actually how to explain it to somebody else. And over the years since you've been teaching, it's been, because I guess I've listened to you and studied so much since you was a teenager on the recordings to see you grow from 19 to your age now, and listen to your play and your tone, your tremolo, and how just, man, massive that has built over the years.
Well, I appreciate that too. If you heard me play these days, you might not say that, but
Oh, yeah.
I did. I actually changed at the beginning of this year. I made the commitment and changed my pick hold.
Really?
Yeah, always, I'm trying to see if there's a pick laying around here, but I always did that.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Well, I switched over to this.
Wow.
Just thumb over the pick, because I got to a point that my hand would really fatigue. Like if it was something that the execution was going to take quite a number of hours of practice, if I was learning a tune that I was playing, that I kind of started to notice this was that Howdy in Hickman County tune that Sam recorded on the record with Alan Mundy, Together Again for the First Time.
Yeah.
But that is like a 5-part fiddle tune, and my hand would really fatigue, and I was having issues with a condition called frozen shoulder, where you lose part of the range of motion in your shoulder. And I went to a physical therapist about that, and at the same time, this had tugged at me for a while, and after probably about October of 2019, I really started doing that all the time at home. And then I finished out the year still using the other pick hold, and we had 5 weeks off between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then when we started back at the beginning of 2020, I committed to that pick hold, and I was a wreck on stage. The first gig was at Jekyll Island, Georgia, playing down there, and I was so nervous. I don't know if anybody could tell, because even the guys in the band, I didn't tell them that I was doing it either. So it felt like just this weird alone. Because after you've done something for, you're a certain way for your whole life, it's a big deal to change a technique thing like that. And that's the one thing with the pandemic that I kind of got lucky on the timing of that, because after March 14th, I think, or March 12th, something like that, was the last show that we played before this shutdown. So I've been playing at home, a good bit, and it's just now really starting to feel normal to do that. This number of months into it.
Yeah. And it's helped your shoulder, and
it has. And the physical therapy did too, especially early on when I was more dedicated to doing it. But yeah, it has. Which typically that condition, like after a couple of years, kind of goes away. And you know how everything is when you're trying to learn something about it. Some people say do physical therapy all the time, 5 or 6 sessions of it a day on your own. And some people say total rest, don't move it at all. So who do you believe? But it has cleared up. Yeah.
We'll get a deal, man. Well, one more question here. We'll let you go. It's something that we asked all our guests and stuff. And one of the biggest reasons we started talking about this was to bring a lot of education to people watching these about the Carolina sound and about players, and some players that didn't go on to be professionals, that were just really good musicians in the Carolina area. But what would you say about the Carolina style of music in North Carolina?
Man, it's one of those things that you have to, it's kind of like it's in the water or something is the only way that I would know how to put it. And if you don't recognize that sound, it's one of the toughest things as a teacher, to try to explain to someone what anticipating the beat is, or playing on the front side of the beat. It's a feel thing. And I do feel like that North Carolina regionally has a certain feel musically, a big part of which, like Terry Balcom's banjo playing. Kristen did, she was out west and did a workshop, and that was going to be the theme that she talked about. And it went over everyone's head. A lot of people just really don't, I guess they don't identify with that. It's a certain sound, it's a certain feel, and bluegrass is very regional. And of course, we're going to be proud of the region that we're from, but bluegrass sounds a lot different in Ontario than it does in Austin, Texas, or Missouri, or California, or North Carolina. You have these different pockets, but with so much of the history being there with Earl Scruggs, if you look at that. But I would have to say, I feel like the band that ushered that sound in would have to be the original Doyle Lawson and Quicksilver, because you had Jimmy Haley and Lou and Terry all from North Carolina, and you can't deny it that was a groundbreaking sound for a band to have. Nothing had really been quite like that it was so slick for the time, but still played with so much authority, and all of the fundamentals that are supposed to be there but it still had this certain presentation. If you hear that band live, nothing like that had really happened before. If you listen close enough, even if you don't really get it, maybe you can start to figure that kind of thing out. That would be.
I agree with you on the Quicksilver thing, and a lot of people come back to that. That time, and
yeah,
the group of musicians that was going on there in the late 70s, and Doyle grabbing those guys up, and just, of course, yourself too, being blessed to be around musicians like Clay and Luck and Gina and Greg Corbett, and
oh yeah,
guys, Alan Purdue, and there was so many of you around the same age. And I come a little bit later than y'all, but I was glad to be a part of your group. We mentioned and talked with Steve Dillon, and everybody's give a great answer on the Carolina sound, and we're just glad to call you a friend, man.
Yeah.
So I would imagine a number of people have referred to that band when you ask that question.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
Sure enough. And Earl, leading the way with the way he put the drive into the music, into Bill's band, in 1945 and 46. Just that banjo style leading the way. Of course, Terry picking that up from Carolina and adding just a little bit more to it with the other guys picking along was just an awesome experience.
It is. It has been a blessing to me, and it always has been a part of Third Time Out's sound. I mean, with from the early days of that band with Alan Bobby and Harry both being in that group, it certainly found the foundation of that band was about that rock solid banjo. Just it's to me that one element has so much to do with the North Carolina style of banjo playing. And as mandolin players, Alan Bobby and Rick Allred from that area, knowing both of those guys tended to be more just modern sounding players. The first time I ever heard Alan Bobby was a live show that he had played with Wes Golden, who was living in Winston-Salem at the time, and Eric Ellis was in that band. And that was some of the first like really modern mandolin playing like that I ever heard. That was, beyond, I mean, I'd heard Doyle Lawson and that kind of playing, but there was just an edge in his playing that really appealed to me. And then later on, the first time I saw him live, he was playing with the new Quicksilver, a place called the Sweet Union Playhouse. It was interesting because I saw that band one week, and the very next week, Doyle Lawson was there with Russell and Scott and Curtis. I saw that band the very next week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was still in high school at the time. I guess I was maybe 15. I don't know if I could drive yet. Lester Deaton promoted one of those shows, and I went down there with him.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I was driving yet or not.
And I know that you and Alan put a record together here a while back too.
We did. That's been probably 5 or 6 years ago now, but we sure did. Kind of put our 2 cents in on the whole mandolin thing. Worked up a bunch of harmony parts and stuff together. It was a fun record to make.
Yeah, folks, y'all check that out. Check out Wayne's solo record as well as DVD. And like we mentioned, might not can get it, but some of it might be on YouTube. But mainly check out his YouTube channel and go see Third Time Out live. And we've enjoyed it so much, Wayne, haven't we, Brooke?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being.
I have too. I appreciate you guys reaching out to do this. This will be a great archive. I mean, people may see this years from now and learn something.
Absolutely. We hope so. Well, thank you for the Carolina Sessions, everybody. Y'all have a good one.